Today I've invited Steve Drake to Zoom recording for broadcast. Steve, a warm welcome and Haidamai to our radio program.
Greetings and thank you from the Holy Land.
Steve Drake is a qualified quantity surveyor, project manager, and property developer from New Zealand. He was the representative of the Baha'i faith on the Auckland Interfaith Council for many years and is still active in interfaith work. Currently, Steve is working in Israel, so he's joining me from Israel. Steve, you're in Israel, in the Holy Land. What are you doing?
Yes. Well, I'm actually over here for a period of time on a voluntary basis, and I'm helping with some of the building of the works that they have at the Baha'i World Center, which is centered in Israel. So
what is it, the Baha'i? Say it again, the Baha'i World Center.
The Baha'i World Center, if you can imagine, it's like the Vatican for the Catholic. The Baha'i World Center is the focal point, is the head administrative center for the Baha'i World Faith. And that's where our administration comes from.
And you're working there as a surveyor?
Well, I'm helping in the project management of a particular building. It's called the Shrine of Abdul Baha. And it's very close to the ancient city of Akka. If you have heard anything about Akka, it's I believe it's the oldest constantly occupied city in the world. And everybody's tried to conquer it, from the Crusades, Napoleon. Everybody's tried to have a go at Akka. So this shrine is just outside of there, and it's taken us we're on probably a couple of years now, and we've still got another 2 more years to go to finish. But it's looking pretty good, and we're going towards casting the roof in about 4 to 5 months. So we're looking good as far as that target, but we still need another 2 years to finish. So that's what I'm hoping, and I'm here regularly to help.
Can you explain what a shrine is? Because from the Catholic tradition, for example, we have shrines, but they're usually small. You're talking about buildings.
Well, we have in our faith, as a basic principle, there are 3 shrines that will be established, the Baha'i faith, no more, no less. And principally, 2 of the shrines, one is about the shrine of the Barb, which I may mention a little more later. The other one is the shrine of Baha'u'llah, who's the founder of the Baha'i faith. And the shrine that I'm building at the moment is the son of the founder. And his title is Abdul Baha. And
they are all in Akka?
There's one in Haifa and 2 are in the Akka area. So, and the shrine is where their bodies, sacred bodies, are buried. And we have opportunity to go literally into the rooms and the chamber to offer prayers and reflect with them in that building. So that's why it's very important and a special, very sacred place for us.
Now I understand why you have buildings, because when I think of some shrines in other traditions, you have a relic. And of course, if the relic is smaller, so you have a small shrine. But if it's the burial place of the whole body, then it's a big place. And
it is. I mean, this is the founder of the faith. So, you know, this is why it's such a magic place for us to have that relationship.
So you mentioned the Shrine of the Barb. And now during this month of February, the Religious Diversity Center calendar features the picture of the Shrine of the Barb. Can you tell us more about this particular shrine?
Sure. It's centered in the halfway up the Mount Carmel, and there's a lot of biblical reference to the mountain of Carmel, as far as I think it's referred to in the Bible as being the vineyard of the Lord. So it has a lot of history there. Elijah's cave is actually in Mount Carmel, in the range. So this is a very special, very spiritual mountain. The Shrine of the Barb, and perhaps I should just explain who the Barb is. The Barb, that means the gate, and that's his title. And he is the forerunner of the Baha'i faith. So he had his own faith when he established what was called the Barbi religion. And then he was the forerunner, foretold that Baha'u'llah was coming and that he would establish a new faith and that everybody should then follow him. So the Barb is a very special part of the twin prophets of the Baha'i faith. Now, his building is established halfway up the mountain on Mount Carmel. And it's a very interesting building because it was built, it's taken many years. It was finished approximately 70 years ago, but it dates back to over 130 years ago that the founder of the faith, Baha'u'llah, pointed to a particular place on the mountain and told his son, Abdul Baha, this is where I want you to build the shrine for the Barb. And we have that place marked with a little ring of trees. So we know exactly where he was standing and pointed. And the shrine of the Barb, it's an 8-sided building. It has a reasonably, square structure on the bottom, which was built over 100 years ago. And then later on, a superstructure was built on the top, which is a tower, sort of a drum, and it has a golden dome on the top. Very distinctive design. And if you have a chance to see the picture that's in the either on the web page or on the calendar, you'll see this golden domed shrine surrounded in a garden. And just as an interesting point, the remains of the Barb is buried in the center of that particular shrine. Abdul Baha, who I mentioned is the son of Baha'u'llah, was buried temporarily over 100 years ago in one corner of that whole shrine. But the plan was always for him to have his own shrine. And hence, that's what we're building today, is his shrine in the Akka area. So eventually it will be just the shrine of the Barb, and he will be the only one there. Interestingly, as a quantity surveyor, as you say, there's some sort of statistics that you sort of hear and are aware of. I know that there's over 12,000 tiles, golden tiles on the dome, individual tiles. And there are a special tile that was made, I believe, in Portugal, which has a gold material and sealed in a porcelain to withstand the ultraviolets. So it's really a fascinating design and structure, and that's why it has this beautiful shine of the golden dome on it.
Who decides on these details, Steve? Who decides on these details? Is that also fixed by Baha'u'llah, or is that a tradition within the Baha'i faith, or is that something that somebody today said we need to have something very special and let's make it to 12,000? It's like a holy number.
No, it's well, the design process and the building of it, as I say, was in 2 phases. The first phase was the base octagonal shape, and Abdul Baha built that and interred the remains of the Barb in that building. His grandson was tasked to then complete the superstructure, which is the golden dome aspect that we see today. So that's the legacy of following on the design. As far as 12,000 being some magic number, no, it's just the nature of the shape and size and things. But there are 18 windows around, which has some significance in the Barb's faith. When the Barb first declared his mission and to say that I am a prophet for this age, there was 18 individuals like apostles who first recognized him. And so this is where that 18 number is significant in relationship to the Barb. The garden that it's sitting in right now, and that's, I had opportunity to be here over 20 years ago to build, there's a 1 kilometer garden, and there are 9 terraces below and 9 above. And so it's in the center with a rippling effect coming out from the center of the shrine. So if you can imagine this 1 kilometer garden going up the mountain with this golden shrine nestled in a garden, that's the nature of the building that we see today. 10 years ago, I believe, UNESCO declared it as one of their World Heritage buildings. So they acknowledge the uniqueness of that structure. And so it's a very protected heritage building now and through the World Organization.
For the RDC calendar, this year is the year of light. And so the Baha'i community chose this picture of the shrine at night because it's illuminated.
Yes.
Can you tell us more? Have you seen it like this? When you're now in the Holy Land, you would see it maybe every day.
Sure. Well, the administrative head of the Baha'i faith has made a decision that every night the shrine is lit up. And so every night you can see the sea of lights. The picture that you may be looking at is the shrine is bathed in light, and then there are lights from top to the bottom of the mountain every night. And it's interesting because the Barb, when he was in prison during his period, he made a complaint. He said, I don't even have one candle to write with. And so from that, this is now a sea of light to compensate for that lack of one candle in his prison cell. So that's, yeah.
So how did he write without the light?
Well, it's probably only during the day, I imagine, but but he was deprived of even one candle. So this is our way of trying to compensate for that lack of light in his imprisonment. So.
He will be certainly very happy about that. Steve, on the next to the picture, there is a quote, and the quote starts with, it's a quote from Baha'u'llah, and the quote starts with, "No light can compare with the light of justice." Is this quote part of a Baha'i scripture or a speech?
From my understanding, that's a small extract from a very lengthy literary work which we can study, and it was written at a particular time when Baha'u'llah was imprisoned and he was being persecuted for trying to promote world unity and equality of men and women and all of those principles of the faith. In this text, he was writing and really appealing to the leaders, to the influencers, those people of the world, and basically was asking them to, people of insight to consider. And this is where that quote comes from. And the completion of the quote, and as I say, I'm paraphrasing here, is that without that, you cannot have the establishment of world order and a tranquility and peace in this world. And so that's the key of what justice will bring. Without justice, you will have inequity, you will have strife, you will have wars, you will have anything. And I think it's even more prevalent today when you reflect on the injustices we see today. And that's what he's calling us, the people and leaders of the world, to do. So that's the relationship, from my understanding, of that extract of a quote.
Talking about architecture and scripture, do you have scriptures within the architecture? Do you have like some faith traditions have quotes on the walls, or they have pictures that relate to stories? I've never been to a Baha'i shrine. Are there any pictures, any paintings? Is there any? You have the architectural structure, but is there also pictorial art?
There isn't, because we don't look at pictures or photos, because you then start worshipping the image, and really it's beyond looking at the person's image. You're looking towards their spirit, what they share. And so inside the shrines, they're beautifully decorated. You take your shoes off, you go in, It's a very peaceful, quiet place, subdued lighting, and a beautiful smell of jasmine and rose water. So if you can imagine the smell of jasmine or rose water, that is a very strong scent that is left in the shrines. It's a very calming, very peaceful place, but there's no distractions with, you know, effects on the wall or those type of things. The one thing that we do have, I think, that is a common aspect is in our houses of worship. We have several houses of worship built around the world in countries, continents, and now even in national situations. And they're nine-sided buildings, and in the very dome, we have the representation in stylized writing of the greatest name, which is God. So that is the one thing that you will see in the highest apex in the houses of worship. But it's not something to worship at. It's just to acknowledge that there's no other higher name than God.
In which language is it written?
It's a stylized writing, and it's from the Arabic root. So it's an Arabic calligraphy, would be the best way to try and describe. And in English terms, we call it the greatest name, which means.
Yes. And you mentioned the houses of worship. Do you have a house
Yes.
of worship in New Zealand?
We don't have one. The one we have is there's one in Australia, in Sydney, and then there's another one in Western Samoa, and there's another one being built in Tuvalu. So, there's various places that are having, houses of worship. There is property in Auckland, which has been reserved for a house of worship, but it's for the administration to decide it's your turn to have one. So, we're ready until they give us the blessing, and then we'll get on with it. So,
and you have all the experience from building shrines, so you would be looking forward to not having to travel half across the world, but do it
absolutely. Absolutely. It's in Henderson. It's a little bit of a trip for me, but I do it happily.
Not as far as Israel or Holy Land.
Not as.
And
True.
Steve, tell us, as you are a specialist on buildings, you've now explained how the shrine looks like. So we have a little bit of an idea. And
yes.
What about the house of worship? Are there certain rules? How does a house of worship looks like? Is there a standard, or is it depending on the culture of the country? Or can you tell us more about it?
It's the latter approach. Each one of them are absolutely unique, and the idea that as a design criteria, they all have 9 sides, and that is representative of the 9 major faiths in the world: Judaism, Christianity, Buddha, etc. And so it's representative of the 9 major faiths in the world. And so there's a doorway around on all 9 sides. They are to be in a sea of, as much as possible, in a garden situation, a tranquil. There's water elements sometimes, but each country has a unique flavor and a design. And very much, I think, the architects are briefed to take on the spirit of the country or the continent that they may be. So, for example, the one in Western Samoa looks very much like the fale. I don't know if you know what a Samoan house shape looks like, but that's the shape. It's a dome, and it's that sort of shape in a fale, sort of say. So you can really see that. The house of worship in India is a lotus flower. So if you can imagine the petals, the Sydney Opera House, that type of effect. Imagine a lotus flower with 9 sides, petals at different angles. So each one takes on a different design.
So when you start the building in Auckland, you would have to get in touch with Tangata Whenua and maybe produce a kind of marae style.
I'm not an architect, but yeah, absolutely, it's quite possible. Quite possible.
Do you have Maori members of your faith?
Yes, we do. And we have our administrative bodies are from a local assembly, national assembly, and then we have, of course, the international one here. And we have Maori in local assemblies. We have Maori on the national assembly. So yes, they're at all levels of our faith. So yeah.
So, and how many of these beautiful temples have you visited? Have you been to India to the Lotus Temple, to the Lotus House of Worship?
I have not gone to the Lotus one. I've gone to Sydney, Germany, and I lived in Samoa for 5 years building their one. So I really do know that one. So to my credit, I've only been to 3.
I'm very interested. How does the German one look like?
How can I best describe? I mean, a picture says 1,000 words, but it's I guess in my words, it's a very strong design. There's a lot of strong concrete truss elements outside, so it's a very strong, concretey looking building. It's not delicate.
I think that
so maybe that's German. I don't know.
I wouldn't recommend having a fale in Germany because that would be too cold, and in the winter times, and would be other reasons. So yes, I think it's great to have this. What you say, that you adapted to the local traditions. That's really beautiful.
Absolutely. Yes. There's a lovely one in Chile, which is like a twisted element that looks like a flame, and it's the stonework is alabaster, which is transparent. So when you have the lights on inside, it's glowing naturally through the stone. So it's architects. They really get creative.
I think that when you think of previous history, the popes in the past who had such a desire to have beauty around them, and so they attracted all these wonderful artists who could then finally live out what they wanted to do. Some couldn't quite, because they had to do what the Pope said, or what one of the bishops or cardinals said, but they had the chance that they didn't have in a private house, for example. So yes, having this opportunity to prepare to do art, and with a religious context, it's something really special.
And I think it's a timeless thing.
Yes.
And their name lives on with that involvement in contributing in that way, for sure. So it's a huge honor. It would be a huge honor.
I think it's always amazing when there is this discussion between a beautiful place of worship or giving money to the poor, because in both is important. But I remember talking to somebody from Africa, and he told us about the beautiful copy of St. Peter's Dome. I think this was in Côte d'Ivoire, or in that area. And people said to him, why do you spend all this money for a sacred building like this if you have so many people who are hungry? And he said, yes, you wouldn't believe how much hope it gives to people. They walk for weeks to visit that place, and that's a goal in their lives, and they don't have any other goals in their lives because they are so desperate. So having this place of worship in the beauty that they would never have at home.
Tonight, before we talked, I had opportunity. I had a meeting with the architect for the Shrine of Abdul Baha, and he's based in Vancouver. And so tonight we were on the video, and he's agonizing over a particular detail for the stonework as we go. So he's still very, very passionate and looking for the tiniest detail as we're building through. So we're trying to work to finalize those. His brief in the design has been to make the building last a minimum of 500 years. And so if it lasts 500, it'll last 1,000. And so that's where, from a quantity surveying situation, we build well and lasts. And therefore you spend the money and you get the return from it. So that's where, that's the philosophy of our buildings.
But I think that is really important, because architects don't just build a building, especially not a place of worship. They have a lot of thoughts that they put in. And when you look at some buildings where you have the time of worship at a certain time of the day, and the architects thought exactly of how the sun would come in the building from this and this angle. It's nothing is by it's coincidence. It's not just built, but there's a lot of thought that goes into it before. And I think that is always, it has to be considered when you change anything of a place of worship. If you change something and you think, oh, well, we can put this here or there. Well, there are lots of things that you really, the architects have put their heart and soul in it.
He spent years and still working on it. It's just agonizing over the color and the tones of stone and the contrast. So, you know, all credit to him. He's put a whole passion and art into this, and so it's to his credit as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Steve. That's been so enlightening. So we have the light again. Thank you very much.